quote Mr. Newby every time I see him, he always tells me that irrigation always pays. It pays for itself in a state like Alabama. We've just completed a study and we'll be putting together a series of conferences on it next year to show data from Alabama on that issue. The complicating factor with irrigation in Alabama, severalfold. Number one, a lot of times you can only get financing for about 8 or 9 years. You really need that financing to be about 13 to 15 years. So that's one constraint. Second constraint is we rent a lot of land. We have a lot of absentee landowners in the state that rent their land to farmers on a one-year basis. So the mode of renting land in Alabama, culturally, historically, whatever, is a year-to-year lease. So there's zero incentive for a farmer to drill a well or to build a pond. Likewise, there's zero incentive for the landowner who might be sitting in New York or Atlanta or Los Angeles to try to micromanage the construction of a pond, because if that farmer doesn't lease it, the next one will. And so that's a second constraint. From that perspective, I think we've got to start a discussion in Alabama with those different communities together. And that's the purpose of our an Auburn University conference coming up, I think, in August of this upcoming year.
Do you see that debate over water rights becoming a more of a hot topic for us in the East, particularly in Alabama?
Well, a little bit. In general, you saw the maps in the last speaker's presentation. It's going to be very difficult to depend on groundwater for irrigation like they do in the Ogallala Aquifer that stretches from Texas up to through the Midwest and southern Georgia. We just don't necessarily have that reliable supply widely available. So you almost have to be looking at catching that 13 to 20 inches of runoff that occurs each year. So when you get to surface water issues, the large majority of that water is run through power generation plants. And so part of the whole discussion has got to be with the power industry. And I've had some discussions with Alabama Power to just kind of give them a heads up that this is an initiative that we're going to be working on, and they'll have to be at the table.
Thank you.
I'd like just to add one clarification on that. When we talk about irrigation here in the Ray Belt, we're really talking about supplemental irrigation. It's not like the Arizona and California where it's a full irrigation. And that has the tremendous ability to stabilize both the quality and the yield that farmers get, take the risk out. But for some crops like cotton, it creates some research needs too. We're still struggling how to tell growers how to irrigate cotton in the rain belt, considering that it could rain 4 inches over the weekend. So we still have some research challenges to do too.
I wouldn't be too anxious to totally disqualify groundwater, because there are some significant geographic areas in the state where it could be used for irrigation. In fact, Geological Survey of Alabama is in the process of evaluating the potential for that, for those areas within the state. It does have some additional infrastructure needs that perhaps utilizing surface water does not have. But uniquely, or the best potential situation for a farmer to be in would be where he could use both surface water and groundwater, depending on what year. And of course, it has to be located properly for that to happen. But I think a combination of approaches, using both surface water and groundwater wherever the resources is available, is the way to go.
Thank you. I did overlook one of our assistants here today, is Jessica, because she's back in the back running the video camera from our IT station. Thank you, Jessica. She's done a lot of hard work with our computer setting this up, which you got to be either 18-year-old or somebody that has a training with these electronics these days. Dr. Shepard, question for you is, what about controlling or eradicating exotic species, particularly, I guess, to the timber industry? my dad worked at a paper mill. In fact, he worked at the mill in Monroe, and he's been retired for about, I guess, maybe 10 or 12 years now, but he still smells like that wet end of the pulp mill. When it gets hot, he smells like a paper mill. Anyway, and hey, where's Ray Hilbert? I don't want to hear you guys talk about the chicken plant smelling bad or chicken litter. You need to live south of a paper mill. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
A lot of people that work in the mill said it smells like ham and eggs to me.
Yeah, it is to me.
So yeah, you talked about exotic species. So I guess there's two, that concern us. One is plants, and so we have problems with things like Kogon grass is a huge problem, a growing problem. It's very difficult to control because of course, it's been a problem for many decades. We've got Japanese climbing fir and several other invasive species that do give us some concern. I would say they're not easy to deal with necessarily, but I think they are to see management. And I know most forest products companies don't really see those as huge threats. They're able to manage through that and really work, with their business model. To me, the one that's a more difficult threat is some of our pests that come in through exotic species. So, for example, the chestnut fly being one of the big examples. Chestnut, one of the most common trees in the eastern United States, is completely gone now. Okay, so that was a huge effect. We have emerald ash borer that's essentially wiping out ash trees in the north part of the country. I mean, ash trees may not exist in the future. We're going to find, maybe we will have to go to the bats totally. Those ash trees will be gone. We're seeing huge diseases among bay trees from Florida, even in South Alabama and South Georgia, being eradicated due to an exotic fungus that's carried in. We've had elm disease. To me, these are the problems that we have had absolutely zero success in doing any control of those kinds of exotic pests. So to me, that's the biggest challenge we face, is those kinds of issues. I'm not trying to belittle the fact that the invasive plants like coconut grass, they are a significant problem, and we need to work hard to address them. Those other ones, to me, we've had, I see these management techniques like don't move firewood. Well, you know what? People are going to move firewood. And this pest is going to move. There's no way you're going to keep it from moving. And our track record is exactly that. I think that the hope for us in some of these kinds of situations is really molecular biology and biotechnology. This is going to give us some very precise tools that we can use that science to try to target very specifically some of these exotic pests we have while not affecting everything else. So I think that's kind of the hope. That's where a lot of our science and research needs to be targeted, is using molecular biology type techniques for these. What our problem that we have is zero track record of solving.
We just simply must advance science and technology to address these issues at every level. What we've been talking about, the proper application of pesticides and herbicides, the proper seasoning, if you will, of what you guys do with government regulations, and then the education of the consumer, and also encouraging that young person to want to be a part of agriculture. That's the underlying challenge, and we simply must continue that effort. So I think we may be getting close to. I've got maybe one more couple of general questions here for you. Please fill out that evaluation and give it to Crystal or Amy in the back, if you will, or any of us. We want to be able to put on an even better symposium next time. But here's a couple of questions. We'll put this all together, and each one of you can comment as you'd like or whatever. And this is listed in the evaluation. But let's talk about this together corporately for just a few minutes. What do we do next from each of your perspective, and how do we take these ideas that we talked about today from this question card and go to the next level, go to the next step, and how do we set goals? And I know these may be even rhetorical somewhat, that how do we continue to help, like at the county agent level or extension? How do we continue to encourage research money to come your way? A little bit of money through the Commissioner of Agriculture to do our regulatory job. how do we address these things that we've discussed today? Let's talk about tomorrow, the next day. What do we do next?
That's quite a broad question.
I understand. Give it to
It can be answered very specifically, and maybe I'll take that approach just in terms of funding. The way land grants are funded, the same way we're funded at Auburn. You have a general education budget, which is in Alabama is funded out of the Education Trust Fund. Then you have a experiment station budget, which is funded separately. You have that with Tuskegee and Alabama A&M as well. And then you have an extension budget there. And those budgets float up and down just sort of based on an algorithm. Now, the interesting phenomenon that occurs is when you're faced with pay increases and those types of things, your general education budget is supplemented with tuition. So one reason tuition has been rising at twice the rate of inflation in the U.S. is because the states don't put as much money in the general education fund, but salaries for professors go up and operating dollars and so forth. And so where you get it from is tuition. And so if you look at the extension budget and the ag research budgets, there's no tuition that goes in there. And so anytime I give a raise, we gave a one-time raise of 2% this year, and I think a 3% average raise. So 5% of my budget, that's a 5% budget cut to me. That's money that forever goes into the labor pool for my faculty and staff. So what we've seen in Alabama and Georgia and virtually every other state is an erosion of the dollars available to do research because you can't supplement that out of the tuition pool. And state funding is, I mean, it's fairly flat. It moves with the economy.
I'll jump in with a comment that follows up on our two congressmen who are starting out, saying that they collaborate, work together across lines for the state of Alabama. I think that same relevance occurs for agriculture as well. Used to be cotton was king in parts of the U.S., and we didn't want to see corn or soybeans or poverty beans, as they call them on the farm in Mississippi. And now we're just happy to have a corn grower get interested in cotton. And so as a result, we're seeing much greater collaboration across the commodities. We realize the resources are limited, and we've got to look for common ground and common interest and work together. I think that's a key take-home message for us. Whether it's forestry or cotton, we're all three.
I'd just like to echo that. I'd like to even broaden that. I've worked in part of my career kind of a regulatory support role, doing science that address regulatory issues. So I have worked with the EPA, with a lot of other federal regulators, state regulators, and I've also worked some with environmental advocacy groups, and it's pretty much an adversarial kind of system. And I would suggest that that's not really buying us a lot. And as we move into the future and try to feed these 9 or 10 billion people, that's a model that is going to be less successful than trying to collaborate together. Again, get together and decide what we can agree on and work together on things. I know this sounds maybe idealistic, but I think that's the model we need to pursue. We also need to pursue, talk about precision agriculture, we need to have precision regulation. So the regulation